So two brand new motorcycles from Moto Guzzi. The Eldorado, a laid back, chilled cruiser with white wall tyres, very retro. All it was missing was some tassels on the end of the handlebar. And then the dark, sinister bruiser cruiser version of that bike, blacked out, much louder exhaust and big flat bars. And that was the one that I rode for the day. The reason I picked the Audace over the Eldorado is because I spent a lot of time on Ducati's Diavol, a bike that I absolutely love. And the Moto Guzzi just really reminds me of that mean, brutish performance cruiser kind of class. So we've established it looks the part, but what's really underneath that muscular bodywork? The bike's based on Moto Guzzi's California 1400, so it uses the same 1.4 litre 90-degree V-twin, which makes 96 horsepower. But it's not all about horsepower with these bikes. This one makes a load of grunt down low, right where you want it. So when you're pulling off the line, it just feels really brutish. Twin disc Brembo brakes up front, adjustable rear shock, non-adjustable front suspension, and believe it or not, the bike weighs 299 kilos. We've seen this sort of thing from Moto Guzzi before, a few matte black options, but this is the first time we're seeing what they're calling the dark side of Guzzi. Visually, the bike's a lot less chintzy than some of the other Guzzis that are on sale at the moment. No chrome, no saddlebags, it's just a bit more street. Footrests have been pulled back, so you're no longer in that kind of sprawled out cruiser position where your legs are completely chucked out towards the front of the bike. You're more upright, you're sat over the front, your elbows are out, it's way more aggressive. It's got a big chunky 200mm rear tyres, not as big as the Diavol, but when you go around the back of the Audace, you see it's got a big back end, low stance, really squat. It's definitely not some size 0 supermodel. So what's this big old heavy beast like to ride? As I said, I was pretty excited because I thought this could be Guzzi's version of the Diavol. It's not really. To be fair, maybe it's a bit out of order comparing it to the Ducati. Off the bike, it looks like it's in that performance cruiser class. When you get to ride it, the engine especially, you realise it's not built to rev to the moon like on the Diavol. So it's very mellow, it's very smooth, and it runs out of revs quite quickly. The ground clearance, also not as good. You chuck it around the corner and you're quickly scraping a peg. The bars are really far stretched out in front of you, completely flat, and you've really got to give a push of counter steer to get the bike tipped into the corner. So after hitting those performance limits on the Guzzi, it was actually quite nice to just reel it all back in a bit, not be so fussed about going fast, just enjoy the ride. I've ridden quite a few cruisers before, and because you're sat right over the rear wheel and there's like tiny amounts of room for a shock, you usually got a really back-breaking ride. Not so on the Guzzi. You sort of sit on it and the suspension's firm, it's not wallowing around, but it's really, really plush. As well as the big wide bars, which need a bit of a nudge to get the Audace tipped into a corner, the Guzzi's also got a big 18-inch front wheel, which looks great off the bike, but it does slow down the steering somewhat. On the electronics front, you get ABS, 3 rider modes which change power delivery, give you a bit less power in the rain or a sharper throttle response when it's dry, and you also get 3-stage traction control. But it was sunny, we were with loads of people, and there was a big fat rear tyre, so I turned it all off and had a bit of fun. Halfway through the ride I also discovered the bike had cruise control, so naturally had a bit of fun with that. I've ridden the whole V7 range, and I also had a quick go on the Eldorado in the morning, and the problem with them is that they look great, but the exhaust system on it is really muted. It sounds a bit wet and floppy, whereas on the Audace, it's blacked out, it's got different internals, it's a lot shorter, it's a lot more stocky, and it sounds exactly how it should. On paper, it's really easy to start comparing the Guzzi's 1.4 litre engine to things like the Diavol's engine or the 1290 Super Duke engine from the KTM, but it's completely different. It's really sleepy, it's really mellow, slow revving. What it does have though is bags of Guzzi feel, like when you blip the throttle, because of the engine layout, it still sort of tugs over to the right, and it just adds to the bike's character. Build quality is mixed. Everything feels really well put together, bolted together nicely, but for a bike that costs over £15,000, I think some of the components themselves could be better. The bike's got a carbon fibre front fender, which is slightly let down by stickers that were peeling off from most of them, and then the footrests, a bit blocky, a lot of rubber, where maybe I'd like to see some machined aluminium or just something a bit snazzier. But then on the other hand, you've got a nice bright LED headlamp, good quality clocks with really simple switchgear, lovely black alloy wheels, and a nice comfy leather seat. If you accept the Guzzi for what it is, not a performance cruiser, then I've got no doubt that anyone who buys one is going to absolutely love it. It looks great, it's got bags of character, and the components are really nice on it. But for just over 15 grand, almost £1,000 more than the Diavel, I think I'd find it really hard to walk away from the Ducati.